relevant, I think.
So how would you justify us doing a recording as opposed to just standing there and talking? Because I think that lots of people on our course, I think that is in the nature of a lot of people who study fine art that they're not that comfortable with public speaking. But if everyone did the same thing, or if everyone had that same reasoning, they would all do the same thing. So it's a bit of a moment of like...
Yeah, but the point is they're not, aren't they? They're standing up there doing PowerPoint, which is dull.
But
I don't think it's just a matter of... I don't think it's just a matter of doing it because it's easy to present because we don't have to stand up. I think it relates specifically to this exhibition.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be possible to do this if we'd been to see the one in Frith Street Gallery because it would have no relationship to it at all. You wouldn't be able to sell it as an idea, if you see what I mean, because it just hasn't any relationship, but this does.
And this is an art course. I don't think they're going to be as strict as, or as like uptight.
We're supposed to break the fucking rules.
Right. Like I'm hoping it's going to be more of like thinking outside the box thing than a like you did not conform to the fact that it was meant to be a traditional presentation, which, to be fair, I haven't really seen that anywhere, that it has to be like a very...
It absolutely doesn't. Having spoken to the third years about it, I know they had a huge variety of stuff, but mostly PowerPoints. The PowerPoints were dull, boring. Apparently. But then I didn't take a survey of all third years, so they can't all have thought that.
And the whole thing of Baldock's work that we are like the whole
theme idea
is like is about not creating something necessarily, but that's what we're doing, but something that takes the place of actual human communication, which the emojis do, and which the columns begin to when you start to see them as like figurative sculptures, and what we are doing by presenting something like this.
He does claim personalities for each of them as well, and each have a different voice.
Well, he left it ambiguous. He was like, I hope they have their own characteristics. I mean,
they
the way
do
I
kind
saw
of,
each
the way
one,
they're constructed. But
I
maybe it's not just...
sort of saw each one as like a limb to like a creature.
Yeah, I definitely thought they were all. I mean, like they were definitely all like from the same.
Yeah.
Like
the being.
Yeah.
Like is it like a body or something?
Yeah.
It's a body that's consumed a bunch of other bodies then, with all the other fingers and ears and.
Because they're all kind of the same.
I
They were like composite of the same smaller objects.
Yeah.
But just different colours.
And repetitive moulds of the same shapes.
Yeah.
So you see it as like it's growing, or is it dying?
Because one of them had actually collapsed and was spilling its guts out, which were the emojis. So, but then also there was one which was really small, which was still standing upright, which could have seemed like it was still growing. So I feel like it didn't represent either a decline or a growth. It's just that constant cycle.
Yeah, it's like a...
And the fact that there are great big chew marks in the top, as if it's eating the clay and creating the emojis, or couldn't work out whether perhaps it was eating the emojis or creating the emojis by eating the clay.
I definitely saw it as creating them, because of the way that it was almost spilling out of the body, but then also the fact that when it had fallen, they were all there in like perfect form.
So they were half formed. They were fat, like little biscuits, until they hadn't been squashed like the other ones that were so poking out of the holes.
But I do certainly think it's alive, or it's like.
There's like quite bodily things.
It is, because he personifies it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, having human sounds coming out of it.
Human sounds. He said like the fingers on the inside were like capillaries. And then another relationship he made, which was like really interesting to me, is he said, you know, there was that one of the main pillars had a section out of it, and you could see the steel rods that were holding it up.
Yeah.
And he said that those were like an Elizarov frame, which is like the sort of, it's like an external metal fixation you get around your leg when you have like a fracture or something, and it keeps the two halves of the bone apart, so that then the bone can sort of like grow and fix itself. And because he directly related it to that, I mean, I was sort of seeing it as like as a limb, and like that is like.
Yeah. So it's like when the Russians developed that, so they could.
Yeah.
So if you were born with short limbs, they could stretch you,
Right.
and the body would fill in the bone in between.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting that he used that connection as opposed to the stands that are used to support young trees, because it's a very similar structure essentially, but it's used for very different kinds of organisms.
Mm-hmm.
But I also, I couldn't really get to the point of why he avoided eyes in every part of it,
Yeah,
like
that's true.
proper depictions of eyes. You know, he had
Apart from
casts
that
of the
one.
fingers and the mouth, except for that one where he had a very realistic,
They're like
quite
photocopies of his
creepy.
own eyes, actually.
I think that could be because eyes aren't specifically human body parts, and all the other
What do you
ones
mean?
were. So like.
Oh, I see what you mean.
I'm
Everybody
sure-
has animals
yeah,
have
I can't,
eyes.
I can't think of one off the top of my head, but like I'm sure there are a whole host of animals that have eyes that look like pretty similar to ours,
Right.
whereas like no other animal really has hands or feet like ours,
Or ears.
or a nose like ours. Or
He
ears
was
like
trying to
ours,
keep it
yeah,
quite
okay.
or a
human.
mouth
like
like ours. Yeah.
I don't think there were any noses either.
I mean,
I think-
no like casts of
Yeah,
noses,
yeah.
but things represented
Things that
noses.
look like
Yeah.
noses.
Yeah, but there were things that represented eyes as well on
Yeah.
every single tablet.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
But if it's about like communication, or rather
There was that
the
slight-
decline of communication, then perhaps mouths and ears are the only bits that are really necessary, and hands connoting like body language.
I
Yeah,
did
that's why I
wonder
think
whether there
speaking-
was a link with the fact that some of those mouths are stoppered, so that they can't make sound, and
Yeah.
the stitched mouths and
Mm.
the possibility
I
of
feel like most of them
Um,
are either closed or filled with
yeah.
something, or like
so
sewn up.
censorship and either your inability to speak because you're being disallowed, or your inability to speak because you know that somebody will vilify you for whatever it is you say.
Yeah, so like with emojis, emojis provide an easy way of communicating without worrying about your text being like overanalyzed by the person you sent it to
Yeah.
for half an hour after they receive it.
It's the removal of sound as well as a means of direct communication, because it was all visual communications as emojis are, and then the only part of the exhibition which used sounds, it was things that came across as quite nonsensical to us and just
Yeah.
expressive, you know, the moans of the people.
And all the little like twitters and beeps that when it almost sounded like the noise that a person and their phone makes together when it's not on silent, or like when you like send off an email.
Yeah.
You do good phone.
And even when there were those sounds, the high-pitched sounds that we thought were like the clangers.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what you guys thought because you hadn't seen the clangers, but I immediately saw that as the communication of some kind of alien.
Yeah, I do too.
Alien beings. You know, it still came across to me as communication, but something that I can't understand.
There's another thing it kind of relates to. I realise now, talking about it, is the sort of whistle and hum you used to get when you tuned in an old FM radio. So as the station came in, you get those high-pitched whistles and crackles and stuff. So antiquated forms of communication.
I definitely sort of see it as like an alien, or like some sort of creature that sort of lives between like timelines, because of the sort of the mixtures of like totem poles, which are a thing of the past, and like emojis, which are such a modern thing, and then sort of like aspects of like this could be the future. And so I thought it was all like a bit of a mesh of that. And the fact that it was sort of like personified, I sort of saw it as like a creature or like an alien or something like that.
Yeah, definitely represented a sort of alternate timeline by having those things as artifacts. And if language were developed differently, not as complex as we speak, well, then again, it could be just as complex because can't understand the different tones and the meaning behind all the different sounds.
So written language is definitely getting less and less complex, right, as time passes.
I think we moved
by
towards
virtue
pictorial
of the
language.
fact that we're now sending each other emojis.
Universally understandable,
Yeah.
universally misunderstood. There is another thing, the whistling tribes in Turkey and South American places where they need to communicate over long distances. I think that's probably dying out though, what with the advent of phones, because presumably now when you're in the mountains you can probably text your mate on the
Call or
next door.
radio
Yeah,
or
exactly.
use the internet.
That's what I like about it. It's like a big mesh of all these things that exist in completely different eras.
Yeah.
And
so
it's sort
past
of,
and future.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's almost like that room is an installation of like a contemporary version of ancient ruins that documents like something to do with the decline of communication, or what communication is at the moment, what it has been reduced or like boiled down to by technology being ubiquitous.
I don't think.
For a future generation to see. I don't know.
It is interesting, that idea, isn't it, that it moves in time from 2,500 years BC to today. So theoretically, it's spanned over sort of 4,500 years. The idea of looking both forwards and backwards.
Does he say anything in like a video or something like that to do with
the tablets?
To do with who he thinks the audience of the columns will be? Because it said in the gallery notes that it will be like someone from the future, but it doesn't say whether or not that was us, like the viewers, or someone from 200 years in the future.
I don't know if he does in the video. Can you remember?
He said it was like he wasn't sure if it was a ruin of the future or I don't remember the other part.
He said that maybe the pillars were in construction. So like coming across a building site, say, when you're on holiday in Greece and you find a building site which you're not quite sure whether the building is going up or coming down, kind of thing.
So it's like a ruin.
Not specifically
that is
Greece,
still
but that's
being
using
built.
as an
Yeah, he says.
Yeah, exactly.
He says they still have an ongoing function to them, but he doesn't quite know what it is.
Yeah.
So that's again why I sort of see it being this sort of like extraterrestrial or like interdimensional thing.
Do you think the function is didactic in the same way as it is with like the Ebla tablets or with a totem pole? But didactic for like someone from the future or an alien or anyone to come and like start learning about what life was like now.
Do you
Like
think it's a
virtual.
representation of what life was like now, though?
Well, I don't know. How
feel
did
like-
you fit, in simple terms, if you went in then, does it represent life now? I'm not sure.
I feel like the emojis.
Without some sort of help to get into what's going on in the exhibition, you would never look at it and say this is what's going on now, because it's not that simplistic.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
totem poles are not a thing that we use.
No.
So it's not a depiction of our culture or our time right now.
No, but as Charlie discovered, totem poles had a role as sort of emojis of their day. What was it you
Yeah,
found
they
out?
could tell like stories.
Yeah,
and
they
shit.
were used to tell stories, but also to define people as well. So there could be totem poles in memorial of a person. But then the thing that I found most interesting was that there were shame poles, which could be created to ridicule an individual who'd done something wrong, which I think relates quite strongly to face crimes directly.
Yeah.
I didn't make that connection. Yeah.
And in a similar sort of way to how on Facebook there are multiple. They took away the dislike button ages ago, didn't they? So there definitely used to be a
Yeah.
dislike button, but you could do like an angry
Are you
face
sure?
or a crying
I don't
face.
think
I don't think there
I
was
don't
a
think there was a
dislike
dislike.
button.
I think there was a
There was
large call. For
There was a cry for a dislike
Yeah.
button
Yeah.
because you could only like something and then you couldn't put any emoji to it at all.
Yeah.
So if someone put up that their cat had died, you could only like it. You couldn't say, "I'm so sorry, your cat's died."
Well, the thing is, you could, but then people were more interested in that situation, for example, where someone would post something negative. They're more interested in having the ability to respond with an emoji than write
writing
the
the
message
words.
saying condolences or whatever, because it's simpler and maybe a better way of communicating with someone over that platform, because using emojis on those platforms, I think, comes across as more sincere than giving your words, because if you have genuine concern for someone or something like that, why would you not use a more direct spoken tool like a phone or in person?
Yes.
Mm.
Yeah, I see.
And it, like, do you guys use emojis like regularly on a daily basis? Because I don't.
I do now.
Depends on who I'm talking to.
Yeah.
That's true.
Because it
My
makes me think
relationship
that like
with
emojis might be quite like particular to our time, and might be something that in 10 years isn't a thing anymore.
That's
Technology might have
interesting.
moved on to the next substitute for like actual face.
Do you know it'll make its own emoji
interaction.
from what your face actually says?
Yeah.
Well, you can already do that on the new iPhones.
Really?
It recognizes your face, and you can record your face, and you can put any expression that you want onto any emoji you choose. So like dog emoji, cat emoji. You can send a video or just a picture, and it reads your eyebrows, your eyes, your nose, your mouth, your cheeks, key parts of your face that express emotion.
So you can change the emotion that is on the image of your face.
Yeah.
Oh, that's some David Foster Wallace ass shit right there. Well done.
But also I think that emoji is a very uncomplicated language, and I don't think that it's anywhere near replacing written word at all.
Yeah.
Like it's a supplement of the written word. And it's just like a lazy response a lot of the time. So, for example, if someone responds to one of my stories on Instagram, or if I'm responding to theirs, it's more likely in those situations it will be an emoji reaction instead of a word, because that comes across as more sincere than a very brief like haha, or
Really?
Yeah.
yeah.
How weird. You see, if I get emoji responses on my Instagram, I instantly think, fuck her. It's just lazy.
That's what it is. Though. It is like
It is.
I will always
Yeah.
do like a fire if I think something's cool.
Yeah.
I can't be asked to be like, yo man, this is so sick.
Because it requires actual typing.
Yeah, I don't
And
want
then
to be sitting
thoughts
on
of
my
how the
phone
words go
for
together.
Like 15 minutes trying to like word a message.
Yeah, and then also I think that when you send an emoji to someone in that context, if you sent fire, for example, they're going to interpret that based on how they know you as a person as well. So if two different people sent the fire emoji to the same story, it'd probably be interpreted slightly differently. Like, for example, they might know that you're maybe a slightly more sarcastic person and be less offended by you sending that about something specific, as opposed to someone else who's more sincere. If they sent that, it'd be interpreted differently.
Yeah.
So in a way, it is more personalised, but also it's very ambiguous.
And it doesn't work, emoji as a language, like not necessarily, but if we take that into account, then emoji doesn't really work if you don't know the person that's sending you it.
Yeah.
It's quite interesting.
I think that's cool. Also, when I was messaging Cece initially a while ago, she thought it was very cringy that I used the crying laughing emoji. She said that back home that's a cringy thing to do, no one does that, like how some people interpret saying lol now.
Yeah.
And everyone would just say haha, whereas for me saying haha was slightly cringier and more contrived than using the crying laughing face. So I think that, again, it's very ambiguous and kind of simple, but it's complex in the nature of how people interpret it depending on their relationships to one another.
So I haven't unpicked the whole Facecrime thing.
I've completely avoided that sort of link because I can't even, with interviews and even like reviews of the exhibition, it just seems completely like void, like it was just...
It's quite a tenuous link, I think, isn't it?
Well, I don't know about
I
that
don't know
because
if
I
it
think...
can be. He's given that title to the exhibition.
But I think that the Facecrimes ties into exactly what we were just talking about, which is, your personal interpretation of an emoji is similar to your personal interpretation of a facial response.
Yeah.
It's like using the right face, whether it's an emoji or your own face to depict the right thing.
Yeah.
And the Facecrime is using your face to depict the wrong thing, as defined by whoever. In 1984, it's by the government, right?
Yeah. Newspeak decided to have the crime, Facecrime.
It's like Ingsoc or something like that.
Yeah, I'm afraid I don't know the others.
Something like that. That's the name
They
of
have
the party.
various expressions, aren't they? Yeah. It was that Canadian story about the boy who was... That 2-minute video that was taken out that we were talking about, and I can't remember the name of the publication I was looking at.
It's Freedom and Economics.
Yeah, exactly. Where they were talking about... my brain's dropped out. It's so annoying.
What I found really interesting about that was because I was quite stuck, beginning the essay. I just typed into Twitter and Instagram #Facecrime to see what would come up, and before pictures, but there weren't really much tweets about the exhibition, but before pictures of the exhibition came up, it was all about this kid and the sort of drama that went down between. I don't even know how to explain it because I'm not really sure on the details of it, but that kid with the Make America Great Again hat, and then I guess he was Native American, but I don't really know.
Yeah, he was...
The musician who was playing.
Yeah.
The kid just had an expression on his face which was laughing at him.
He was smirking. He was
Yeah.
smirking. The thing is that the video became kind of irrelevant because it was that picture which went
So it was
more
just
viral
one picture
than the
out of
video.
a whole long video which
Well,
was then taken.
the video was
to-
initially, there was like
It
a
was like an
4-minute
hour long.
or a 3-minute video that went viral, and the whole video is, Gabriel said, I didn't even know that until Gabriel told me it was apparently about an hour long.
Yeah.
And, when you're given that tiny fraction of a story, you're obviously going to be misled. But then when they just took the picture alone, I think that ties into
That became-
emoji and Facecrime more, because
Yeah.
it's just one snapshot of an
instantaneous
expression
second.
that
It's like-
everyone's basing their judgments on.
Yeah.
And interestingly,
Yeah.
you can barely even see the older man's face in that picture. You just see the side of it.
Yeah.
So you don't even get both sides of the story
There's
in
very
that
little
tiny
context.
snapshot. You just see the hat, which
it's been
already
honed
gives
in
you
so
certain
much
judgments
now,
about
but
the
yeah,
person,
exactly.
and then it's his expression, a slightly arrogant smirk.
So in fact, that could have been any kid anywhere and needn't actually have been in the same place at the same time, if you see what I mean.
What do you mean?
The fact that the picture and the context has now been so cropped, they
Yeah.
could in fact have picked a picture of, say, you with a baseball cap on, probably not America, make America great again, and
Fake news.
put that out there as you with a smirk on your face. He was smirking at this guy, and the platform it's on is so big necessarily that it can take on a life of its own.
Wait, do you mean if the photo was edited, or if I was there and the picture had been
You-
taken of me?
What I'm saying is that you didn't even have to be there.
Well, the picture's so
What we know
related
is
to
that
the
what we
video,
know
right?
about the way pictorial evidence is used is that it doesn't need to be real, it doesn't need to be right, and it doesn't need to be true for the story to gain enough momentum for it to become a truth.
Mm.
Yeah.
Well,
Are you
I
sort of
think
saying,
the
like-
key element was one of the key elements was the hat. I don't think that you
Yeah.
could switch it out with a baseball cap or
No.
anything else. I think
Yeah.
that
So for that
because
story,
it's
the
such a
specifics were to
polarizing
do-
issue in
yeah.
America that Trump gets people going in America. Half of America hate him. So then
Yeah.
having that's what initially made it go viral. But then the fact that boy is being targeted so heavily is because of his face.
Yeah.
And the
But I
expression.
think,
Yeah.
I think what you're saying, what actually went viral was the picture of his face. Like, there are
Yeah.
probably more people that have seen the picture of his face than that have seen the video.
Oh,
Even just the
undoubtedly.
2-minute video. So it's like, I see what you're saying, as in, like, some people will
It's
never.
become divorced from the reality of the original situation.
Yeah, for some people, like.
Yeah.
So yeah, I see what you mean, and it is like, and I suppose he's not been charged, obviously, because there isn't such a thing as a face crime in our reality.
Yeah, and
but
also
like, he
there's,
sort of
there's,
had
no,
public.
there's no such crime as smirking at somebody who you think
But-
is perhaps not, I don't know, not being cool or something. I don't know, whatever his.
But people
that's
did
sorry,
try to like
completely
publicly
lame,
shame him.
Yeah,
which
but
was
that's
like,
what like the general public acted as judge, jury, and executioner
Yeah.
in that situation. He doesn't need to be formally arrested or
Yeah,
anything
yeah.
for his life to be heavily affected.
That's
I'm
the
sure that-
collective group acting as
Mm.
a whole against an individual without any basis of knowing what
Exactly.
actually went wrong.
I guarantee you that will affect him getting jobs in the future, or affect
Sure,
his life for a long time,
Yeah.
because the focus of the image was his face. It's not
Yeah.
just someone doing something wrong.
Mm.
That person's there. It's his face which is wrong.
I think
Yeah.
he's like 15. I think. Actually, I shouldn't have said that because I'm not totally sure, but
But he's-
I'm
It
pretty
was
sure
a,
he's
it was a
young.
high
The point is
school
he's
group
young.
trip,
I
so
was gonna
he's
say,
going
he's
to be
young
18
rather
or
than-
younger.
Yeah,
Right.
he's young rather than in
Which
his
is
30s
like,
or something.
I think it's kind of crazy to think that, yeah.
It's insane because
He's
after all, his
that's
mate,
affected him.
his mate could just have told him a joke at which he was smirking. Could have been nothing to
Anything
do
could
with
have happened.
anything could have happened.
And I think Gabriel said that the man approached the group of students. They
Yeah.
didn't approach him.
Yeah.
And so that little piece of information immediately changed my own perception of it, because obviously in that he didn't recognize that standing next to someone smirking would be perceived by other people negatively. But if he was approached by someone, let's say he's standing his ground,
Yeah.
that's a very different story, as opposed to him walking up into someone's face and being obnoxious.
Yeah.
And that's just
Yeah.
a tiny detail,
But
which
it's
you
an
couldn't
important
you
one,
couldn't
isn't
get
it?
from the
Which
picture.
yeah.
Yeah,
Or
and
the
I-
video that I saw, the 4-minute video, that didn't.
That didn't show that either.
No, it didn't show that part.
And so what I mean, it sort of relates to face crime in the novel, as in like the authority in the novel is the party, but the authority here is public.
Yeah.
Is just the collective public on what
Yeah.
they deem.
It's a really
Yeah, how they-
interesting takedown of individualism.
Right.
Sort of. I think I see it a bit like that because the collective group mentality has become the stronger of the two things.
Mhm.
And so then, in relation to Baldock's exhibition, in terms of that specific story, like obviously the only real life, or at least mainstream real life incident of face crimes existing, how does that relate?
I don't know how. I mean, I think it brings up the question simply because of the name of the exhibition. I think you have to examine why he's called the exhibition that, and therefore maybe it's simply that the face crime is to be constantly taking selfies, and his tablets in the hallway are kind of like slow time selfies. He apparently made them quite quickly, and they reflect his mood as he made them. So they are a kind of clay selfie, I guess.
I think the tablets as well, taking that form like of a literal tablet, and like creating fair game for puns about like iPads being tablets and stuff.
Definitely.
That like motif of the face in the square, which is FaceTime. That like kind of justifies his link to 1984 just for the lyrical qualities of using Facecrime as the title of his.
I sort of feel like that's what it was.
And with all those tablets, as soon as you walk in, like Facecrime, I feel like it's quite an aesthetic part of his whole larger concept. That link to like digital surveillance and being watched through a screen rather than in person, perhaps.
Communicating at arm's length. He does like to, apparently in previous exhibitions, throw the two possibilities of sort of opposites existing at the same time in the same space. So the slow capture of something versus the speedy digital throwaway, and the past and future.
There is a lot of that, exactly. With the past and the future, there's loads of stuff like that.
And he says what else there is actually.
He questions whether it's dead or alive, or if it's growing or disintegrating. Yeah, so there's a lot of.
And the handmade and the sort of metal, machine-made structures.
Yeah.
And the emojis being just stuck onto the side of these otherwise very like bodily and like physically made sculptures was quite uncomfortable, because he said something in one of his writing about emojis being like intangible and like not real as we know this to be real, or like this computer even, or an animal or a person, or even an emotion that we see in like the actual real world.
Okay.
I wonder if an emotion is as tangible as an emoji though, especially if it's a flicker of a facial expression.
It's definitely not as lasting as an emoji, as receiving an emoji. Receiving an emotion is like, you forget about it half an hour later.
And so he kind of
that emotion
addressed that by capturing his own emotions in the tablets. Taking that intangible thing and making it physical, and if it's an artifact to be found by future people, lasting for however long.
I think what's quite interesting as well is the notion that if it's an artifact to be found by future people, and the whole thing is so focused on like humans and human things, and we are in this like age called the Anthropocene, where like human intervention with the environment and with the world has never been so like absolute. He'd almost be trying to convey something of the like self-centeredness of humanity.
I mean, is there anything we can say about the materials that he used?
It's quite
Maybe
reminiscent.
like the wool carpet, like what's that? Does that have anything to do with anything? Because none of us have talked about that.
Yeah, that's true.
It's quite reminiscent of the arts and crafts movement, like all of it. Like all very handmade, all like...
Well, I thought that the wool floor immediately made me feel like I was in some kind of primeval cave. It's how I imagined a Neanderthal's home would be inside a cave. You know, you've got to make it comfy somehow.
You've
and
got the
so
tightest Neanderthals in the whole world. It was so nice in there, wasn't it?
It was homely.
I was going to say,
Yeah,
I really
colours,
enjoyed
like-
it.
I immediately sat down as soon as I came
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
which I don't think I've ever done in a gallery. Just walk in and
that's
immediately
true.
sit down. Maybe
And
after I
just-
got tired, but it was the first thing I did.
Kind of live with those figures for a
Yeah.
bit. It was really interesting there, actually, wasn't it?
Also, as I said to Gabriel the other day, I wondered whether having that carpeting there was extremely important in of itself, or whether it was a solution for him to hide all the wires which were obviously running between the structures to power them, and whether it was an important decision to hide those wires to make them feel as though they had a certain life to them, or whether it's a representation of something more advanced that we understand, because
It's really interesting. It's quite an elaborate thing just to
Yeah.
hide wires, isn't it?
But I think the fact that I
quite a
didn't
simple
even
thing really, just
I
a
didn't
carpet.
even like notice. It didn't. I never even crossed my mind that there were wires and that he would have to like hide them.
Yeah, I agree.
Why? Because
I
they had
reckon
a certain life to them, or
You'd have a battery powered
Because I suppose you felt quite. You didn't really feel like you were in an exhibition. Like it felt like you could, except for when you walked up to one and tried to touch it and you got told not to. But like it felt.
I did think if I had kids in there, they would have instantly been picking those things
I
up
really
and
wanted to
playing
nick
with it.
some of the little like
Yeah.
pendants.
Yeah.
Necklaces.
But like
Super tempting.
I was, because it made me feel like, I mean, like you've said, like it's very homely. The baskets, the ceramics, it's all quite interior design stuff, and like,
It is, it's all real. It remind me of laundry baskets.
yeah,
And he apparently spun the wool himself.
yeah, he did, yeah.
It's kind of nice.
People like William Morris like built his whole house by hand with him and his mates. And got people he knew to like paint the walls, and like, each brick was handmade.
And each
and the
stretch of
whole
wallpaper.
thing, yeah, like it was all done like himself.
The carpet doesn't cover the entire floor, and I wonder if that's also something that. I mean, I suppose that just.
Where all the columns stood on carpet.
Yeah.
They were.
But interestingly, the carpet like kind of almost mirrored the shape of the walls, but didn't quite go all the way up to the edges, and in some places overlapped and rode up the sides of the wall
Yeah.
a little bit.
So I feel like again that's sort of like is it growing or is it retreating? Or,
Yeah.
But I sort of want to see more in that, but I can't think of what that could be.
I thought it was just like more continuation of the imperfection of handmade things, you know, like
I think
if
it's
it,
what he likes.
actually,
that
yeah,
region,
yeah.
Add a
isn't
bit
it?
here and a bit
Yeah.
there, and take a bit away from that.
Yeah.
I think that like the use of the whole like arts and crafts movement, like material language, is interesting, given that that movement sprung up like when the Industrial Revolution was starting to happen, and it was basically people trying to resist the like industrial production of objects, and like trying to like check crib sheet. Yes, I think the arts and crafts movement was probably the first time people started worrying about like consumerist throwaway culture and objects that you have for a week and then chuck in the bin and it goes to some landfill site, and they wanted to make things by hand and make objects that like had integrity in their own right. and maybe Baldock is sort of calling on that in his use of materials and processes, particularly given like our context, where like everywhere we go is full of like plastics and like throwaway
single use.
object, yeah.
Yeah. They're concerned with the inhumanity of the systems that required repetitive actions as well.
Yeah.
The idea of a factory where someone had to work was dehumanising. So the idea that someone would have to take on that job and only do that job would make them into a person who was then unable to be a good person in society. So the idea that you would make your own things, you would then value your own things and look after them and make them last a really long time as well.